So we're just going to look at some common questions on the A-level exchange and transport topic. So first one, describe the relationship between the size and surface area to volume ratio of organisms. So for this, the answer is, as the size increases, the surface area to volume ratio decreases. Or you could do the converse, as the size decreases, the surface area to volume ratio increases. Describe the gross structure of the human gas exchange system and how we breathe in and out. So structures named in the correct order are trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and then alveoli. And when you breathe in, the diaphragm contracts and flattens, and the external intercostal muscles contract. Therefore, the rib cage will move up and out. This causes the volume in the thorax to increase and the pressure to decrease to below atmospheric, resulting in air moving in. When you breathe out, the diaphragm relaxes and goes back to its dome position, and the internal intercostal muscles contract, and the rib cage moves down and in. This causes the volume of the thoracic cavity to decrease and the pressure to increase to above atmospheric, resulting in air moving out. Another common one, binding of one molecule of oxygen to haemoglobin makes it easier for a second oxygen molecule to bind. Why? Well, this is because binding of the first oxygen changes the tertiary or quaternary structure of haemoglobin. This uncovers the second binding site or uncovers another ion or heme group to bind to. Next one, explain the advantages of lipid droplet and micelle formation. Well, droplets increase the surface area for lipase enzyme action, so faster hydrolysis of lipids. Micelles carry fatty acids and glycerol or monoglycerides through the membrane to the epithelial cell. Next one, very common exam question. Explain the role of the heart in the formation of tissue fluid. Contraction of ventricle produces high hydrostatic pressure at the arterial end. This forces water out of the blood capillaries at the arterial end. Next one, explain how changes in the shape of haemoglobin result in the S-shaped or sigmoid oxyhaemoglobin dissociation curve. So the first oxygen binds to the haemoglobin, causing a change in the shape. This allows more oxygen to bind easily or greater saturation with oxygen. This is called cooperative binding. Describe the Bohr effect. So the curve moves to the right, so there is a lower affinity or the lower percentage saturation of haemoglobin. Haemoglobin unloads or dissociates more readily, and more oxygen is given to the cells or tissues or muscles for faster respiration. Explain the countercurrent mechanism in fish gills. Water and blood flow in the opposite direction. Blood is always passing water with a higher oxygen concentration. The diffusion gradient is maintained throughout the entire length of the gill. If water and blood flowed in the same direction, an equilibrium would be reached. Describe the effects of asthma. The muscle walls of the bronchi or bronchioles contract. The walls of the bronchi secrete more mucus. Therefore, the diameter of the airways is reduced. Therefore, the flow of air is reduced. In emphysema, the FEV value decreases with age. Why? And one of the disabilities that results from emphysema is that walking upstairs becomes difficult. Why does this happen? So first one, why does FEV value decrease with age? Because the internal intercostal muscles get less affected, or there is less elasticity of lung tissue. In emphysema, less carbon dioxide can be removed and less oxygen can be taken up. Therefore, there's less aerobic respiration. Therefore, that's why they find it difficult to walk upstairs, because they don't release as much air. So smoking causes changes in the lungs and airways of smokers. Suggests changes in the lungs of people who continue to smoke that could explain the change in their FEV. So the airways are narrowed. There is excess mucus in the airway. There's inflammation of airways. The elasticity is lost, or scar tissue builds up. Next one, the oxygen dissociation curve of the fetus is to the left of that for its mother. Explain the advantage of this for the fetus. So there is a higher affinity, or it loads more oxygen at lower partial pressures. Therefore, oxygen moves from the mother to the fetus. Similar for llama haemoglobin. There is a low partial pressure of oxygen in the lungs. The llama haemoglobin is able to load more oxygen, or the haemoglobin is saturated at low partial pressures of oxygen. Remember, llamas live at high altitude, so they struggle to get oxygen. The haemoglobin has a higher affinity for oxygen. How is oxygen loaded, transported, and unloaded in the blood? So haemoglobin carries oxygen, or has a high affinity for oxygen. Loading or association occurs in the lungs at high partial pressures of oxygen, and it unloads or dissociates to respiring cells or tissues at low partial pressures of oxygen. And unloading is linked to higher carbon dioxide concentration.